And this love exists despite however bad it can get. Now there's courage there, isn't there, church? That's the kind of courage that the church needs. No matter how bad it gets, no matter how wounded the world is, no matter how sinful we are, resurrection is the baseline of God's reality, God's perception of all that is. Life change is not so much about being saved, though it feels that way, but that the universal, eternal power of God's love shines through a fragile human lifetime. Now that's an honor. That's a real honor to have life change and the love of the risen Jesus operating within your life. Fragile as it is, unreliable as it is, the resurrection of Jesus, which is the baseline of all that God relates to on this earth, is shining through Christian lives, shining through the life of the church. For us to embrace life change, for us to embrace the love of God and the resurrected Jesus, means we have to trust the story of God's love. That's what the church should desire to do in all things. Trust the story. It's weird. You say Christ is risen. That's bizarre. But you either trust the story or not quite. For us as Christians, trusting the story is not only what we do, it is what we invite others to do. It is what we, as missionaries in Logan Square, invite people to do. Begin to be curious about this story of Jesus, which has entered into our lives. Maybe there is something to trust here. Maybe there is something here which will wake us up to new possibilities. Trust this story of love, we say, against all that comes. Well, trusting a story of love against all that comes sounds wonderful until we have to face all that comes, don't we? When life collapses in on us, when there is an avalanche of anxiety and a whole bunch of frustration and failure, when we ourselves undermine the very things we love and care about the most, we face our limitations. Now, one of the wondrous things which the power of the Holy Spirit does in our lives is that Spirit takes our limitations and transforms them. The Holy Spirit says, I know what you're made of, because I've been with you from the beginning. There's no mystery here. The Spirit says, I know what you're about. I know where you've been. I know what's inside of you. And I'm still going to work with you, despite all of that. Because you've desired a change in life. Because you've come to trust the story of the risen Lord. The Spirit says, I have work for you. And as the Spirit gives us this work, we must face our limitations. Now, last Sunday, we heard the story from the Acts of the Apostles about how the 11 remaining apostles had to come up with a replacement for Judas, the one who betrayed Jesus. And so they take two guys, Matthias and Justus, and Peter, who's heading the band, says, well, we know now that Jesus has ascended into heaven, so he's gone. I guess it's up to us to figure out a solution to how to replace number 12 on the committee. See, the church has always had committees. And so they pick these two men who are likely candidates, and they draw straws. And they pick Matthias. They trust that somehow God is going to be in their drawing of the straws and in their prayer, and that's how the committee will get built up to number 12 again. I love the fact that the church is doing its best, and it looks so lame. It looks so incompetent as it tries to come up with an earthly solution to the divine mystery it is called to proclaim. The church looks almost pathetic as it says, all right, well, we've got to find a replacement for the betrayer. You guys, which one is it going to be? And yet this morning, we say those limitations don't matter. This morning, when we celebrate the inbreaking of the Holy Spirit into a group of incompetent, fragile, insignificant people, we see that the Holy Spirit does a lot more than simply helping them draw straws. The Holy Spirit moves them and does bizarre things through them as they go out into the streets on fire with God. And as they go out and they start speaking in languages that they didn't know before, they proclaim a message which is beyond the limitations you and I think are imposed upon us. Now, church, every church has limitations. Did you know even our strengths are our limitations? Even when we think we are doing really well, even when we think that the sailing is smooth, when the church looks powerful and affluent, maybe when the church even influences politics, and it says, oh, we're doing really well now. Those are limitations too. So now, since we are the Church of the Advent, and we're in Logan Square, y'all know what our limitations are. We have our problems with budgets and memberships and a building that's kind of not so great shape. We have the challenge of a neighborhood where the love of God can be known, and we have to work to get the word out. We have to be always welcoming, all embracing as we have been in these last few years, amazingly, beautifully, that I've been. We're called to that kind of missionary work. And yet we say there are so many things that are up against us. So many challenges that we face. So many things that seem like they're going to undo us. Will we pay the gas bill next month? What about that ceiling that's crumbling? What about the need to get people here so that we can build up a community that is alive and dynamic because the news is that good? What if we don't have the money? What if our spirits fail us? So easy to get caught up in that negativity. So easy to say, well, those are our resources. Thanks, God. And yet, the power of the Holy Spirit teaches the church from age to age, from day to day. The limitations we have are going to be transformed. The limitations that we have are going to be the revelation of God's strength in our weakness, as the Apostle Paul teaches us over and over again. So, church, expect limitations to be transformed, because God promises so. God promises so to those lives that have been engaged by God's grace, that desire a life change, that say, we love you, God, because your final word on this universe is a risen Lord, not a dead one. A glorified Christ, not one who has been shamed to rot on the cross. We believe in a risen Lord, a glorious one, who leaves us so we can grow up and shows up by the power of the Spirit, so that he may dwell in our lives richly. so that he may motivate us to be the church we are called to be, beyond our expectations, beyond our dreams. Happy birthday, church. You look beautiful.